there. Let's check YouTube. All right, live here. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, The Void. Like, I'm your co-host, Buddy.
And today we were born under a bad time. Before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
You know, on this podcast, we talk about games, but today is a special. It is, as people can see, I'm in a different location than I normally am. I dare say people will never see the old location. Not that they saw much of it because there's the green screen. But I have in fact moved across the country, and so this is my new incredibly black dark office in New Hampshire where I don't have any lights. So we have set both of my screens to pure white to try and make up for it. As we talk about, listen, a down home East Coast classic from our roots. Okay.
Yeah, our Jersey roots, The Sopranos.
Our Jersey roots, because Mango finally finished The Sopranos. How many episodes at the very end did you have to go through? Was it just the back half of the 6th season, I want to say?
So at the very, once we were talking, once, Max dropped off, there was the back half after that. But I hadn't realized it, but we had one episode left when we came back from the holidays. Because I thought we had a couple more left, and then they're like, they talk about going to Holstein's or whatever the name of that restaurant was, and I recognized him, isn't that the last? I'm like, is this the last episode? It's like, yes, it is.
Yeah. Did you see? You must have known the ending, right? I mean, we will obviously talk a little bit about spoilers and stuff like that, but just before any spoilers, you knew about the ending for The Sopranos. I feel like it's so insanely famous.
So I had heard it verbally described, but it did not accurately portray what happened. To me, at least to my mind, right? It goes to black. I'm like, wait, that, everybody was like, it was kind of like that was it. But they also described things that implied other things about what was happening there, and it seemed even less than people said that there was to imply things, right? So, it was an interesting ending to the series, I guess. But we'll get it. Do we want to start at the end then? Do we just want to start with that?
I think so, yeah. But before, I mean, are we going to do a pre-spoiler? Obviously, everybody should watch the fucking Sopranos, right?
Yeah, I agree. I have not seen many scenes of Newark yet, so that's still on the list. We'll have to do a follow-up at some point.
Oh my God, I know. Yeah. What we get do a whole episode on many scenes. I have so many thoughts about that movie.
And then on top of that, too, we also have not that it's directly Sopranos related, but I have heard from everybody that the Penguin is supposed to basically be another season of or a thing in the same vein as Sopranos.
It definitely is. I have watched the first 3 episodes of the Penguin, and Colin Firth just won Best Actor for the Penguin last night, or maybe tonight, or something like that. It must have been last night. I guess
think it was yesterday. Yeah.
Sunday. Yeah, the Golden Globes or whatever, and I was like, that is great. He does a great job. The Penguin's a lot of fun. And it is definitely pretty close to the
Sopranos,
sort of the Sopranos in tone, I guess we would say.
Yeah. But yes, I would give a wholehearted recommendation. I think I want to say the 4th or the 5th season. I can't remember exactly. One of the seasons felt like it was kind of a meandering and not a lot was happening. I think the best stuff is early on in the show.
Really?
Yeah. Or at least to the middle. I think I like the later seasons less than the earlier seasons is what I'd say.
Okay. I think I like the later seasons better, but it depends on where you kind of cut it.
Yeah.
I really love cousin Tony Blundetto. His whole thing. We talked about this before, actually, I think on the podcast when I talked about him showing up, clarify. It was the Sopranos was a little out of focus, and then he was just kind of this lens to bring it so sharply into focus, and that's when the whole show snapped together for me, and I loved it. Right. There's also Gloria. I loved. I thought that her whole arc. And everything with Gloria, which I think is season 4 or maybe season 5, right? It's just right around there. That's the golden age that I think I would pin down for sort of this.
Gloria, would describe that character because I'm terrible with characters.
The car salesman. Karsu's
Oh, okay, yeah.
woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, we could talk more about all this stuff after spoilers, but obviously The Sopranos is insanely good. I would describe The Sopranos as sort of the like, the golden age of television, kind of anti-hero television, right? The Sopranos is the pun intended, the fucking godfather of this stuff, right? I think the to me, the thing that makes all of this stuff work is that anti-heroes are super motivated and fun. In a lot of like hero villain stories, the hero is kind of not making proactive decisions. They're just kind of bouncing around, being reactive to everything that like a proactive villain is doing. And so what these shows do is they flip that on its head by making kind of the villain this anti-hero protagonist who you are following. You get to watch this incredibly driven, incredibly motivated, incredibly proactive character, and that's a lot of fun. I think that's the fun of Breaking Bad. It's the fun of Better Call Saul. It's the fun of any of these fucking shows. There's a million of them, right? And I feel like The Sopranos is really one of the first of them. You could maybe make an argument, and I bet people have made a couple of arguments about some of the other really early HBO shows, like Oz, the show about the prison with Ernie Hudson.
The Wire is in there too, right? Or is that a little bit later?
The Wire would have been right around the same time. And The Wire, I think, has a lot to say in terms of breadth, like having a big ensemble show. Sopranos has some of that too, in that, it's not always just about, it's not just about Tony, but it's about kind of this whole ecosystem of mobsters. But I would say that like the real sort of ensemble Wire, where there really is no true protagonist. Maybe people would say McNulty, but I wouldn't personally, right? I would actually say that that's a show that is just about kind of this enigmatic web of people in the same way like Game of Thrones is or something like that. But I don't know. That's my like pre-spoiler, I don't know, the best I can do with why people should watch the Sopranos and care about it.
Yeah, I mean, and I will make a pitch for the very specific. If you are an Italian American that grew up in New Jersey, you should watch it just on the strength. That is why my parents watched it, right? Like they watch it to be like, that's where I grew up. That's where I went to school. Like all this kind of like, I recognize that place type stuff. But I think there is like a real element of like, things that will resonate with you, like things that resonated with me, right? Like, there were some things that were eerily similar to my own life, but like also just kind of like the different pieces of the tradition, like the big family dinners, the way the families interact with the way not the crime families, but like the people in the family interacted with each other, that kind of thing. That really resonated with me. And so if you are interested in seeing a depiction of that either from the outside or from the inside, I think it's worth a watch from that perspective as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll call that good enough for spoilers because there's so much to talk about and it's all spoilery, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you want to start at the end?
Yeah, I mean, it's also the freshest thing in my mind, right? Like there was a significant gap between everything else, but like when I had heard it described to me, it was kind of like it is ambiguous. Like there are people. The way it was kind of described to me is like there are people closing in, and and it kind of fades to black, right? And it's not really that, right? Like it's just kind of like they use the camera to imply that maybe somebody there is something, but like no one actually acts in a way that implies that they're there, right? And then it kind of like it feels like it more cuts than fades to black, although that might have been the weirdness of the particular stream on HBO or on Max rather. I don't know if that was the way it aired originally, but it was like I think it would have been better without the weird camera ambiguity about like the other people in the restaurant, like the weird tension building, because the tension building doesn't do anything, right? Like it doesn't resolve it anyway. I honestly think it would have been better if they just kind of like had them sitting at the restaurant and had it fade to black, right? Like I think that would have sold it better. But what do you think?
I am a big believer that Tony dies, but in like a metaphorical as well as literal sense. There's a lot of people. Here's the needle I want to thread. There's a lot of people that when they talk about it are talking about it like Sherlock Holmes, where they'll say, "Oh, this guy has a jacket." Have you heard about the members only jacket? Did anybody talk about this?
No, I've literally consumed zero content about like about the scene, right? I just kind of like watched it.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm trying to dodge. There is this whole cottage industry of people who are essentially looking for kind of like ethereal forensic evidence to prove that Tony was murdered at the end of the show, right? They will point to one of the people in the bar has a members only jacket on, which is the same jacket that was. You remember the guy who wanted to leave the mafia but hung himself?
Yeah.
At the beginning of the season, it was the same jacket that guy was wearing. There's all of this stuff about just like different, like, oh, Butchie is kind of playing a couple of different sides, right? He wants Phil dead, and so once Phil does, like Butchie does legitimately double cross Phil, but then also wants Tony gotten rid of because at this point Tony is too weak, and just clearing out the rest of the, I think it's the DiMatteo crime family, whatever that whole crime family is called, just makes sense, so he can install his own guys or whatever. It's like all this extra stuff, which I think is completely missing the point, right? It is an ambiguous ending. Whether or not Tony actually dies doesn't doesn't need to happen on screen in order for it to be, in my mind, sort of this kind of like metaphorical death, right? Which is to say that they have that conversation, him and Bobby Bacchanale, um, where they talk about how, what do you think it's like? Oh, you're there 1 second, boom, you're gone, right? That's obviously kind of like foreshadowing for this. And so I think, yeah, Tony gets shot in the back of the head, sure, whatever, right? But also at the same time, it might also just mean that this is the end of sort of Tony has chosen to dedicate himself to this life. And whether or not he gets shot in the back of the head in this restaurant, he will undoubtedly get shot in the back of the head by some guy who is executing a vendetta based on a misheard joke from some completely other guy where he wasn't even involved, which is the end of his, the end of the whole saga with Phil. Oh, that ultimately starts because Johnny Sack, someone's telling a joke about Johnny Sack's wife, right?
Yeah, Ralph Cifaretto,
And I feel like it's that kind of futility that The Sopranos is really kind of about, right? That the anger and the posturing and all the rest of it, there is no code, there is no honor to it. They are all just kind of morons. And in my mind, the ending just shows that kind of contempt in this ambiguous way. Whether or not Tony gets up and leaves the restaurant with his family, gets shot in the back of the head, right? Whether or not he keeps on running the crime family, but goes to prison, gets arrested by the FBI. Obviously, all of that stuff is mounting, right? Like all of his stuff. Tony metaphorically is gone because he has chosen to dedicate himself. The question of whether or not he's a good person has been answered, and the answer, as essentially kind of put by the heart of the show, or kind of the conscience of some of these things, right? The therapist, doctor, whatever her name is, Dr. Melfi, right? Like that question is answered. Therefore, the show doesn't matter anymore. GG, you don't get any more of it. That's kind of my take on it.
Okay. I mean, I feel like there's a point here that, like, when I talk about the ending of The Watchmen, right? Like, it's important to not continue The Watchmen because the ambiguity of what happens afterwards is important. I think some of that's important here too. But I do think you have a point where, like, several times throughout the show, Tony says there's only one of two ways. There's only a couple of ways we get, somebody like me gets out of this. Either you get shot, you end up in prison, or you figure out how to retire in a way that protects you, right? And his way out for that was Chris Montesanti, and he literally kills Chris, right? Like, so, like, that avenue's cut off. There's no one to take his place, right? There's no one to, for him to fade into the background as someone assumes his position. Most everybody, even his all of his most trusted advisors are gone. Except for Paulie, who's half incompetent most of the time, right?
I know Silvio gets that brutal end in the hospital, right? He's paralyzed or whatever. He's a quadriplegic, or I don't remember what they say. He might not wake up or something like that because he gets shot so many times outside of the bada bing.
Yeah. And that part of one of the other recurring things that I saw is that like everybody who tries to like make do better for themselves just like can't hang, right? Like can't like that was Tony B's whole thing, right? Like he was gonna go legit, and it was too much. Like the hard work wasn't worth it, so he fucking walked out on it. Which I think is part of the theme here too. That like these people who like make these can make obscene amounts of money also spend it poorly. Don't like do anything thoughtful with it. Just and like can't like sit down and do a hard day's work, right? Like they're just like not capable of it. It seems like
this is kind of my argument for why I like Little Carmine so much. And you would have gotten to the part that I love about Little Carmine, where they try and involve him in the war, and he goes, you know what? No, this is not worth. This is what I like about Little Carmine. This is why I think Little Carmine is like, not smart. That's sort of what I said last time.
Well, I would say because he's not like he is a buffoon. That's like my favorite part about him, right? Like they just use words incorrectly, right? Like
yeah, he's using words incorrectly all the time. But at the same time, he is the person in this whole thing, in the whole war that's breaking out in the back half of The Sopranos, right? Which obviously, like I said, goes back to Johnny Sack hearing, that from Paulie that someone told
that Ralph Cifaretto said that like his wife, what was it like that like she like something about like her like how wide she was, just like, it was a fat joke. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, like made that. Yeah, exactly. That is the core of this, right? One of Tony's guys cracked a joke and it spiraled so insanely out of control that it ended up like creating a huge war between these two. This is one of the things that I think demonstrates about the show that has a lot of contempt for these people, right? That they are morons. There is no glamour here, right? Like they are there. It's all posturing and machismo and kind of all of the, like all of the rest of it, right? The only person who is smart enough to get out of it and kind of put it to rest is Little Carmine, right? When Tony goes to Florida to Little Carmine to try and like get him to like broker a deal, he's like, no, like fuck off. I don't care anymore, right? Which I think is the most like that's the only he is maybe the only mafioso in the whole show who ever shows that level of kind of like let it go emotional maturity rather than holding on to some insane grudge for the rest of his life.
I mean, I'm going to disagree with you because I don't think it's emotional maturity, right? I think it's him being a coward, right? Because like he does like step his foot in for like half a second and then realizes that he doesn't, that like he's too scared to, right? Like that he doesn't want like the fact that he steps his foot in for half a second and goes to take it and then realizes that like it's not like he doesn't want to anymore says to me it's more about cowardice than it is about like being well adjusted or like emotionally mature.
So I would maybe agree. It's not about being well adjusted. I don't think any of these guys are well adjusted, right? And maybe even emotionally, it's like secure is sort of the wrong frame for it. But it is that he is the one who doesn't take he's the one who doesn't sort of like take the bait. Right, which I don't think is cowardice. It would be cowardice if there was something real and honorable about all this. But I don't think the show wants you to think that. I think the show wants you to think that all of this is just petty bullshit. Right?
The difference I'm identifying here is that like it's not to it is not to say that like him rising to the challenge would have been valorous or good. It's that like there is good bravery, like bravery is maybe like a more neutral term, even though we've got like positive associations with it. Like it is not that he sees that this is the folly of his peers and he must avoid it. It's that for a half second he wants it and he goes to reach for it, but then realizes that he's scared and walks away. Right, like because there is a half a moment where he goes to take it and then he backs off of it because you just can't deal with it, right? Like he's not capable of like risking himself like that. And maybe I'm slicing the onion thin here, but to me the important difference is it's not him recognizing something wrong and turning away from it. It's him being scared.
I don't know. I mean, maybe that's true. I haven't watched it in a while, so I maybe like misremembering. I remember there was a conversation where he talks to Tony about it, and he's like, you know what? I got a good thing going. I don't need this. Like, I don't need this heartache. I don't need this headache on my conscience. I'm just gonna keep doing this thing that I've been doing, and let it go.
So
that's the thing that I think of as sort of emotionally mature, but obviously it's like a very strong word for the
I think I think something maybe you're misremembering is that like when Tony goes to him, he initially agrees to broker the peace, and then somebody else gets to him and says maybe you could have a bigger part in this, right? Because like he's down in like this is part of why he like ends up back north in the first place, right? Because he's down in Florida for most of the time.
Yeah.
And then he gets peripherally involved, obviously through Chris Maltasanti's film thing, right? Which so I don't know. I don't think it's all that important, but I take your point.
Yeah.
Although,
but anyway, about the ending, I just think the ending represents it. It is about death. I think Tony does get shot in like a literal sense. If you were to ask me to like what is on the other end of the ambiguity, yeah, sure, he gets shot or whatever. But I don't think that is really what matters. On a thematic level, what matters is that the question at the heart of the show has been answered. Tony is an evil person. Yes, he sucks and is a dick. There is no, there's no honor among thieves here. He is just a maladjusted, narcissistic rage monster, right? Like,
sure. I mean, I don't think he gets shot. Like the thing that annoyed me the most about it is that there's literally nothing in the scene to imply that anybody was even thinking about shooting him, other than the camera moving in a way to maybe imply that, right? Like it's not like any of the people act in a way that would suggest that they are like that, right? Like if you had a flat shot of the entire scene, they would all look like background extras. It's only because the camera jumps to like the guy that walks to the bathroom or the two black guys, or to like not Summer Meadow. I'm confusing my metaphorically named daughters from TV shows. It like Meadow parking the car weird isn't meaningful, right? Like it's just kind of there, and this is part of why I don't like it, right? Like it's using the camera to imply something that isn't supported by the rest of the text, right? Like,
oh, see, I think it is supported by the rest of it. Like the tension in my in my mind is a little secondary to it. Like the tension isn't necessarily tension about the murder, but it's actually kind of the tension that Tony is choosing to live under at all times for the rest of his life, right? Which is part of my whole thing, right? Like he can't have a moment of real sort of relaxation because the threat of the FBI is always around the corner, because the threat of getting whacked is always around the corner, right? And so even something as mundane as a dinner with his family at some hole in the wall New Jersey diner is like a tension ratcheting experience for him.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. You know what I believe? I believe that Tony dies of a heart attack, just like James Gandolfini, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, true. Anyway, what else? There's a bunch of other stuff that happened. What else in the back half? How do you feel about Bobby? Was Bobby done insanely dirty, do you think?
What do you mean by done dirty? Like
just getting killed in the train store like that?
Well, I think that's the point, right? Like it just happens sometimes, right? Like like people. I think this supports your point, right? It's stupid, right? Like it's dumb, and fucking AJ's insufferable for the whole back half, right? Like
I hate AJ so much.
And then like when given the opportunity to like stand on his like weird misguided principles, he also abandons it immediately, right? Like oh man, this is the type of thing that would make Tony mad, but he's kind of his father's son, right? Like, took the easy way out and like gets peripherally involved in this shit again, right? Like by working for Little Carmine effectively, right? Like,
I actually think that's important. Part of what I think the last season is trying to tell you is that Tony is a fucking moron, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of in the same vein as people how sort of like Breaking Bad sort of valorizes Walter White, and there are people who like kind of can't see past that, right? And will just endlessly rationalize away all of Walter's misdeeds because like they can't help but identify too strongly with him, kind of thing. I feel like the back half of The Sopranos is doing a very similar thing as what Breaking Bad does, where it just keeps showing Walter being an unrepentant piece of shit.
But Walter gets like a at least a minor redemption moment, right? Like Tony does not, right? Like
yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, that's true. Like, I would not say that Vince Gilligan holds Walter in contempt. There is something not pure, but like good about Walter in that final episode, right? His love of just the mechanics of it, of just the chemistry of the science, right? So that's the thing that he like kind of gives this ode to as he dies. He walks out into the lab and he touches all this beautiful and you can tell like really the thing that he cares about is that is that feeling of kind of proficiency and power and prowess
It's
that he
pride,
has.
right? Like that's
Yeah.
his flaw, right? Like he's a proud person, you know.
So I would probably agree with that.
Yeah.
I think not Vince Gilligan, David Chase holds Tony in ruthless contempt, and thinks of Tony as and like it's just so mean and so. The show is really brutal to Tony at the very end about how much of a dick he is and everything.
I think it also gets worse as the show goes on, right? Like I think he goes in the early season from being like a competent, level-headed manager among a bunch of hotheads, which is like why he's the boss, right? Like he knows when to hold, when to hold and when to step back and when to like, not push things, to just be like, succumbing to, the rage or whatever, right? Like, which on the one hand, I guess is thematic development. On the other hand, maybe it's just him doing Tony dirty, and I don't know quite how I feel about it.
I love that rage. Where does that rage come from, though, Mango? Oh, that's the big question. Anyway.
It comes from his hot Italian blood, buddy.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a lot of it, right? And it's also about juxtaposition. In the early seasons, Tony is put up against... He's sort of juxtaposed against these truly vile people like Richie Aprile, Ralph Cifaretto. These guys are such pieces of shit, right? And I don't know how. I guess Phil Donahue or not Phil Donahue.
Phil Leotardo.
Leotardo is also kind of a piece of shit, right? But there's less of like Tony being the good guy in the situation because he's beating to death a capo who just murdered a stripper for getting pregnant. You know what I mean? Like Tony takes on some level of virtuosity because he is the one that beats Ralph Cifaretto to death. And I feel like at the end of the show, Tony doesn't get any of that, right? He is just like he's murdering people. He doesn't care about anyone else getting shot, getting hurt. His deepest friends, right? He obviously kills Christopher. It's just like that brutality and that cruelty and that malice is the thing that makes Tony the sociopath that Melfi eventually realizes that he is. And I actually almost sort of hate it because it seems too easy. I kind of almost am mad about that part of it in the show, is how easy it is that Dr. Melfi just realizes that Tony has been a sociopath this whole time, and there isn't actually anything deeper to his psychology. Because I don't think that's true. He is a deeply, in a psychological way, he is complex and all the rest of it. But he is morally avoid like the darkness I'm surrounded in because I don't have any lights, right? Like I'm Tony Soprano right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the show, like, I think there's a reading of the show that is like very, very dismissive of psychiatrists as kind of being like, trumped up like, hacks, right? Like, I feel like that it does not paint psychiatrists in a positive light in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, that's true. Elliot is her psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Who I think Elliot is also a very contentious figure in this show. The show really fucking hates Elliot. Look like a goddamn moron. Who's the one person in the show who I think is like honestly kind of a breath of fresh air when she shows up? Maybe it's the divorce lawyer when Carmela goes to the divorce lawyer, and Carmela's like, "Oh, what do I do?" And the divorce lawyer is, "Take your kids, divorce your husband, never talk to him, go to the cops." What are you talking about? What are you doing? This is what you do. You divorce your husband, you take your kids, you go to the cops. And the way that she says that paints her almost like she's kind of ruining the fun, right?
Yeah.
Like you kind of hate this lawyer because, like, well, there's no show if Carmela does that, right? But it is this moral blast of ice water down the back of your shirt where you're just like, oh God, she's
Yeah.
right, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then she gets bought off for the cost of a house, right? Like, you know.
I know. I love that though.
Yeah.
Because I hate Carmel. I think everyone in the show is pretty contemptuous, or everyone in the family is pretty contemptuous, because they all, they're either I don't know. Maybe I would make an argument for Meadow.
I would
some
say
variety.
Meadow's not bad, right? Like Meadow weirdly has like the reverse kind of arc of everybody else. She goes from being like a very cynical to being like weirdly almost naive, right? Like because like her thing is like, I wanted to become a lawyer because I saw how the cops treated you, Dad, right? Like, but she's also the one at the beginning of the show that's like, Dad's a mob boss, right, AJ, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I hate AJ. I hate Carmela. I hate Tony. I think they are all, kind of repugnant people. Carmela is very interesting because I didn't realize how awful she was until the episode with the guidance counselor, where she fucks AJ's guidance counselor and then just starts kind of like prodding him for more. And that's the episode where
yeah,
you really see how morally repugnant she is, right? That she is also kind of ruthless and sort of right for Tony in a way because she doesn't have any scruples and just wants, you know, she, she wants to accomplish her goals with as little sort of oversight or um I don't know, she'll just do it in
yeah.
underhanded ways and
No,
doesn't give a single fuck.
when Tony's being mean to her, sometimes he's right, right? Like, she is there because she wants, like, she wants what he gives her, right? Like,
Yeah.
which is, expensive things.
And she looks on the other mob wives, right? Pussy's wife who runs the auto shop, right? She has that whole thing about, oh, poor her, and it's like she sees these people who have failed contemptuously, right? And part of what she's here for is the status, is that she gets to feel better than all of these other women in her. And like that's the part where I'm like, Carmela, you bitch.
Yeah, no, because like it starts like she starts out like poor her, but was it her or was somebody else that like takes over their husband's car business, right? And you can tell that she's like, oh, I don't like this, because she's competent now, right? Like she's like really doing stuff, right? Like she's she's not like queen of the pecking order anymore and has to go and like do her house flipping thing, right? Like um what I kind of dislike is that they ruined Carmela's father, or Hugh, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, because like most of the time he's just kind of like cranky, and I loved him, and he's just like whatever, and you get a sense that he loves Tony because like he doesn't really know what's happening, right? And then like the last two seasons are like, yeah, I built the house shitty, who cares, right? Like bribe the inspector, that's how it works, right? Like which really soured me on Hugh, which made me sad.
The fact that he built the house shitty.
Well, the fact that he's like he's like, it's the same thing as anybody else, right? Like he's running effectively a scam, right? Like he's not building the house to code, and he's paying bribing leaning on someone to get it done, right? Like
Yeah. I probably do have a lot of contempt for Hugh, but just on the sense of like someone who intentionally does a bad job is maybe one of the most contemptuous, just like on a personal level,
yeah.
right? Like I don't think I could ever have respect for someone who does their job poorly on purpose, right?
Well, to be fair to the character, it's not like he is like, I did this wrong. It's like I did this the way that I think is correct, even though that's no longer up to code, right? Like it's like he used like the wrong, like inferior grade of timber, which is what he used to do, but isn't allowed to do anymore. It's like it's bullshit, whatever, right? Like it'll work well enough, right? So, and then Carmela worries about that, but obviously she falls to it as well, right? Like she's just like whatever. Starts on a second house, right?
Who are some of your favorite characters? Do you have any favorite characters?
Silvio. Silvio is like the only person who's like always level-headed and competent, right? Like, and he always has the same look on his face, like he always just like has the same look plastered on his face, which is you know who, like, he's little Steven from Bruce Springsteen's band, right? Like, that's the other thing that's like hilarious to me. But like, he's calm, he's competent, he doesn't have a lot of the other moral failings, right? And like, and he's like, I am happy to be second fiddle because I can like make things run smoothly and not have to have the weight of this on my shoulders.
Yeah, there's the episode where he becomes first fiddle and has like a fucking panic attack. Right?
Yeah.
Because I guess that's when Tony gets shot by Junior.
Yeah.
And in the hospital having that crazy like fever dream where he has the wrong briefcase or whatever.
Yeah, and he go on, sorry.
No, when Silvio gets the taste of control, like that's when things go. Like he's like, "Oh no, I hate this. I can't deal with this." What I actually think is, it's maybe the thing I like most about Silvio, because I would also probably say he's my favorite character, just because I have a lot of respect for sort of his, it's weird to describe him this way, his lawful neutralness, right? In the sense that he doesn't have to moralize his life to himself. Like he and also his wife are completely fine with he's completely fine with who he is and what he does. And he doesn't think he's a good person. He doesn't make all of these, justifications about what he's doing and why. He understands that it's fundamentally like criminal and bad or whatever, but he just kind of doesn't engage with the any of the moralizing nature of it, which everybody else does. Everybody has all these fancy justifications for what they do. They're all dog shit, obviously. Some of them are more advanced or complicated dog shit, but like none of their arguments for why they're doing the things that they're doing any kind of scrutiny, obviously, right? But Silvio just sidesteps all of that, and he just says, "I don't care. It's my job, and I'm going to do it as best as I can." And I actually kind of really love and respect that about him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it makes sense that he's like the owner of the Bing, which is like, a seedy business in the first place, right? Like, no like fake like waste management thing, right? Like, he runs a strip club, right? Like that's it, right? Like,
and he fucks the strippers, and his wife knows that he fucks the strippers, but she doesn't care, and they just are completely chill about it. And you know what it reminds me of? Have I ever told you this story? I'm like gonna throw my dad under the bus a little bit here. What was that?
Say you could do your thing. I was gonna say it reminds me of Mike Ehrmantraut, right? Like, like the.
Oh, that would make sense. Yeah, he does remind me quite a lot of Mike Ehrman. I mean, Mike is a little more complicated than that.
Sure, but like he's got the same kind of like knows what he's into, right? Like, competent, straight shooter, right? Yeah, he's happy with his place, right? Like that guy. He's same type of character. Anyway, you were gonna say something.
Yeah. So I asked my dad once who one of his role models. I think it was for a class project, and he said Johnny Cochran. Okay, the lawyer
for O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, O.J. Simpson's defense attorney, which at the time I did not understand because I was a kid, right? I was maybe like 10 or 11 or 12 or something like that. It must have been after I was 12 because I was living with him at the time. So it must have been like I was like 12, 13, 14. And he said, Johnny Cochran. And I said, who's that? And he said, well, he's a lawyer. And I don't agree with the decisions that he made or something, right? But I really respect the job he did. And I want people to think that about me, that they don't have to agree with my decisions. They don't have to agree with my choices, but they should always be impressed by the job that I do. Which is a weird, it's just like a weird frame.
Yeah.
But like, I totally understand what he means. Right. Now that I have an understanding of who Johnny Cochran is, right? Defending this murderer, getting this murderer off on, kind of whatever, finding whatever way he possibly could to instill doubt in that jury. I don't respect the decisions that Johnny Cochran made, but he's a hell of a lawyer and he did a really great job. And I do respect the job that he did. And like, I understand why my dad would.
Yeah.
call somebody like that a role
that's
model.
interesting. This could lead to a tangent about the legal system, but I won't.
I
drag
know.
us there.
I'm just comparing that to
Yeah,
Silvio.
yeah.
My admiration for Silvio is quite a lot like my dad's admiration for
Johnny
Johnny
Cochran.
Cochran.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's that makes a lot of sense. Other people in the show, like maybe Adriana, like you know,
Oh,
I so badly wanted her to have like left and gone to like and gone to the police and just like have you know cried and broken her heart, but like done the thing that kept her from being dragged into the woods by Silvio, right? Like
I know. His worst moment, the moment that will make you. But
yeah, it's.
I do really love Christopher. Actually, Christopher is maybe my second favorite character, but sort of in that contemptuous way of like I loathe a lot of who Christopher is and everything, but he is fun and exciting on screen. Like when he shows up in a scene, he does fun stuff that I like. And so I just kind of like that about him. He drives a sort of like the plot and story. And Tony murders him, which is pretty brutal, but I actually also do kind of have a level of respect for his kind of like undying loyalty to sort of like to Tony, right? And to the life in a more sort of like general personable. When Adriana betrays him, it does kind of it does fuck him up, obviously, and he's already has all these other problems, junkie kind of. But I actually weirdly think there's something to the fact that the love of his life is brutally murdered, and he knows he directly caused her murder, but he's kind of ice cold about it. Like there's something about that kind of a character that I find just compelling on the screen.
I would say I don't think he is though, right? Like that's like kind of like the start of his downfall, the start of his friction between him and Tony is like he's like I did this for Tony, and Tony still doesn't like respect me in the way I think I deserve, right? Like it's
yeah.
I think his whole thing is like he believes in kind of like the myth of this thing that they do, right?
Yeah.
Like he's the one that gets inducted into it. Like he's the one we see get inducted into it, right? And he still believes it, and it gets him killed, right? Like he believes the noble, like that it's a noble street war in which he's just a soldier, right? But no, it's actually bullshit, right? Like
yeah. That's kind of the tragedy of his character. He helped me understand Tony quite a lot, right? Like the more I began to understand about Tony's anger, this is like what unlocked everything for the show and me. And this really happens in maybe season 4, season 5. You get it when there's a moment when he tells Dr. Melfi, "Oh, poor you," when she calls him on something in one of the meetings, and he becomes his mother for like half of a second. And it was like it locked the whole show fell into relief. It was so satisfying to hear Tony make his mother's argument against Dr. Melfi, kind of calling him on his ethics, right? That he will just become his vindictive, petty, angry mother at the drop of a hat, even though he loathes this woman, and this woman destroyed him, right, in so many different ways, right? Like Christopher really helps in that context. Like Christopher helps you kind of see the way that Tony's anger kind of like manifests, because Christopher's anger manifests in this. There's a lot of like, maybe I would call it self-righteous anger in the show, but anger is always corrosive in the show. So when Tony beats Ralph Cifaretto to death, there's obvious expression, righteous anger, right? He is thinking Ralph Cifaretto has murdered this beautiful, and Tony can't really feel for people, but he can feel for animals. He can't feel, right? And so, he's talking about the horse, he's talking about the hooker, but at the end of the day, he is beating a bad man to death, and he's indulging in his anger, but he thinks it's righteous, right? And the thing that happened, and Christopher does the same sort of stuff too, right? but Christopher, the veneer is off for him because he's worse at it sort of than Tony is. But they both just once they start indulging in the anger, it's like a drug. They kind of get addicted to it, right? And the anger just becomes the bedrock. And I felt like Christopher. Once I saw it in Christopher, I saw it in Tony. The whole show. See, this is great. This is the great show.
Yeah, no, I feel it. There's also like a level to Christopher that's kind of like he can't like Tony has the problem where he's not sure if anybody is ever actually his friend or if they're just like they're his friend because they have to be, right?
Yeah, sure. There's that whole episode where they're all laughing in slow motion at his joke or whatever, and he just sees them with the utmost resentment.
Yeah. And then Chris has kind of like his own version of this, who's like he just kind of doesn't quite understand it, which is his writer friend, right? Who's like his friend, his AA mentor, but also at some point his, client is maybe the wrong term, but like he's somebody that owes him a bunch of money and and involved with him that way, and he wants this guy to be all three of these things at once, and the guy can't, and he's like, you can't tell me, I am not your mob confidant, I am your AA sponsor. And then Chris shoots him, right? Like fuck you, right? Like it's they can't, none of them have like real connections, right? Like Paulie doesn't have abandoned his mother effectively for for a hot minute because it's not blood, right? Like, because and he's angry about it, stupid, but he also doesn't have any other connections. He doesn't have any kids, right? Like everybody ends up with nothing effectively. Junior, right? Like Junior ends up sitting at a wall and being unable to remember anything, right? Like all of his accomplishments kind of, it's Ozymandias effectively, right? Like look upon, my works you mighty, and I can't remember any of it, right? Like, and by I mean like Junior can't remember any of it, right? Like he has to be reminded by Tony what he was, right? And even then you get the sense that he doesn't quite get it. There's another potential end for Tony, right? Like in a criminal hospital staring at a window, his mind fucking rotted to shit, right? Like, I think that's the important part about the ending now that I think about it some more, right? Like that, like you get the sense that no matter how it ends, it's not good for Tony, right? Like he doesn't get his retirement to Florida, right? Which yeah.
Yeah. There's also a lot I feel like about the nature of the mafia in modern era. This is some of my favorite stuff in the show, right? Like there's the whole thing about Jackie Jr., Jackie Priel's kid in second season, third season.
I think it's a little bit later than that, but yeah.
It's second season. No, it's third season. Second season is Richie Aprile gets out of prison, right? And then gets shot by Janice. Oh, Janice, the worst. And then Jackie Jr. shows up. And Jackie Jr. is really frustrated because the way that Tony and everybody in his generation kind of made it as mafioso is gone. And he can't do the things that he wants to, that he wishes he could do, right? And you see it in other places too. Like there's the part where they go to the mob guys go to like the Starbucks to try and extort them for protection money, and clearly the guy is just like, I here, like what do you think I'm gonna do?
Like,
right?
even, like I will lose my job and it won't matter, right? Like,
yeah,
because like I have to report up the ladder to corporate, right? Like,
and I feel like there's just like a lot of like that kind of stuff that I find interesting and sort of fun. There's these flashbacks and these tall tales, these like mythical tales of Junior and Johnny Soprano doing stuff, being crazy in the 60s. You eventually obviously get some of that in the prequel movie, which you haven't seen. You get some of it in flashbacks, right? The flashback to Tony and Junior going to Satriel's and cutting the guy's pinky off with the butcher knife, and then Tony sees his mom chopping the pork that Johnny brings home and he faints and cracks his head open. He has he has one of his first panic attacks, right?
Yeah.
About about all of that. And it's just like all of those things I think are pretty interesting. They're pretty interesting, pretty compelling stuff.
Yeah. I think there was another thing in there about that. Like to your point, right? Like, everything's kind of ossified, and the FBI is after the mobs. And they're harder to bribe. But at the same level, right? Like, there's like the one agent who's like working on counterterrorism, and like is actively rooting for Tony, right? Like he's a mob guy, but he's my mob assignment, so I want him to win. Versus leaks information about like where Phil is to Tony, so that he can
Oh yeah, one of the other great ironies about the show, right? The way the only reason Tony is able to win his because the FBI helps him out, gives him a little assist.
Well, it's not just the FBI; it's the one guy, right? The one guy who's like, who when he finds out, like goes, "Yes, we're gonna win this thing," right? Like as if like he's personally involved in the mob war, right? Like
Yeah.
Also, obviously, there's a lot of like I didn't watch what was coming out. I was like, wow, this really is a lot about the war on terror. There's a lot about the war on terror in here, right? Like, which is
this is one of the things that I have no idea how it's, you know what I mean? The things that somebody pointed it out to me. By the time we were in the 90s, the 80s already had a really strong cultural identity, right? I can remember being a kid in the late 90s, and the way people talked about the 80s was like a very clear thing in my head. And I had this picture for it, in a way. Even now, I don't have a clear picture for what the 2000s, but I think the war on terror stuff is pretty unique to it. And in the same way that like maybe, I don't like there was really serialized degree in whatever 60s, 70s, 80s or whatever, but in sort of the same way that we would maybe see some of tropes or situations, very special episodes about drugs or about like child molesters or something like that would be like a thing that we would consider for comms. I feel like the war on terror kind of like popping up as a thing that is in the background of these crime shows from the 2000s is pretty, I don't know, it's pretty real.
Yeah, I'm reminded of have you seen, I think it's The Rocketeer?
Yeah.
Because like the crescendo of that movie is like the mobsters, who are like the tier 1 bad guys, find out that the people that have hired them are Nazis, and he's like, I might be a mobster, but I'm not but I'm a fucking American or something like that, right? And he turns and helps the Rocketeer like fight the Nazis, right? Like that's kind of like the vibe that I'm getting off of this. Is like, I might be a mafioso, but ain't no Arab terrorist, right? Like
yeah, because it's also a whole thing in The Wire. The Baltimore City cops are trying to do this stuff against drugs. I mean, it's funny that it's put in these terms because I don't think many people would agree with either of them at this point. But where the idea that the war on drugs was being pitted against the war on terror, and that the FBI used to be in it for taking down drug kingpins, right? But now they're only interested in fighting terrorism, and the drug war doesn't have the, I don't know, resources or money or whatever else. I don't think anybody at this point would be like, oh yeah, all the war on drugs and money, like funneled into the police, right? Like nobody would fucking say that at this point. But in The Wire, that's how it's kind of portrayed. And one of the things about McNulty is he has this one friend at the FBI field office in Baltimore who he will sometimes go to and be like, hey, can you get me this crazy FBI special wire tapping tech or whatever? And he has to make some kind of argument to a judge about why it's going to help with, like a terrorism investigation somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, well, is there anything else I want to talk about with The Sopranos?
We can leave it until next week. We can leave it until the Many Saints of Newark, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. There is more stuff that happened, and there's stuff that I kind of like want to talk about, but like, I don't know. I won't force the issue. Well, I do have a real love for The Sopranos. It's one of the first shows of this ilk that I have ever watched where I really got it, and I was like, "Fuck yeah, I agree. This thing is great." Obviously, one of my things is that I think that we're getting better at this all the time. But The Sopranos is a true. The Sopranos is like the right? In the sense that you could watch The Godfather today; it's just as good a movie as it was in the '70s, right? And it is like a pretty kind of Herculean kind of picture, or like Star Wars would be a good example, right? Just incredibly good storytelling, movie making, whatever sort of thing. Sopranos is a lot, I think, where it's serious. It's not just. It's not like Top Gun. Top Gun is bullshit. Top Gun's a movie that people remember fondly because it's well shot and movies at the time were bad, but now we have better movies like Top Gun, and we don't have to we don't have to rely on bullshit. Okay.
All right. All right. Yeah. I think that's a place to leave it then. Yeah. So how were your past 2-3 weeks?
Man, I moved across the country. I didn't have a lot of time for excuse me, I didn't have a lot of time for so much other stuff. What have what have I been doing? I guess the weird thing that is a truly this week is I've been playing a lot of CK3. Had been hopped up on cold medicine all last week. Didn't really do much of anything. I couldn't play games. I couldn't even really watch stuff. I was watching YouTube videos just like for hours and hours. I was watching these YouTube videos for hours and hours on end that were just like dumb bullshit. But like now that my brain is a little on my shoulders, I started playing CK because I'd been listening to the history podcast called The Rest is History. I think I described it a little bit to you last time we were on the pod. The Rest is History did an episode on Charlemagne, who I'd never really understood before, right? Like I understand Charlemagne, I understand this great big empire, Francia, and kind of united France and Germany and also Spain, right, into one sort of great glorious empire, but it kind of falters in the early middle, the early Middle Ages in the 700s. And I didn't really understand the sort of story of it until they did this episode on it in The Rest is History, right? Warlords of the West. That's what they called it, right? And it starts with kind of these Frankish um, warlords who are just kind of going and pillaging and all this stuff. The Battle of Tours. Do you know the Battle of Tours?
No, I don't
Battle
actually.
of Tours is written Tours. The Battle of Tours is a famous battle because it is when the Muslim, I think Umayyad Caliphate, who had invaded into Spain and taken over Iberia, were pushing up into France, and the Frankish king Charles Martel, who's Charlemagne's, I want to say grandfather, maybe father. Charles Martel won this big battle against this invading Muslim force, and it is common. It is well known today because it is sort of it is cast as the triumph of Christianity over Islam, which is not quite true to the history, but
Sure.
it's kind of how everybody like remembers. And now it is used as sort of this thing in European far right anti-immigrant people who say we should get rid of all these immigrants from Syria or whatever, fuck them, and have another Battle of Tours and Charles Martel and all this other sort of stuff. But anyway, out of that comes Charlemagne, and Charlemagne is the Carolingians. That's his dynasty, the Carolingian dynasty. And I realized that Crusader King, I didn't quite know that you could play as the 4 Carolingian heirs because so Charlemagne has a bunch of sons, but they all die except for one. So he leaves the whole empire to his son, and then that son divides the empire up into 4, and those 4 are the Carolingians that you can play at the beginning of Crusader Kings if you do an 867 start. And I really wanted to see if I could make the empire. I was like, let's fucking do it. I'm going to start as king, whoever. I was in Italy and I just got completely owned maybe 6 times in a row. I restarted. I started every time and I kept dying to different things. And I felt like I was in a time loop movie but I instead of being in a time loop movie where I figured the whole thing out, I'm in a time loop movie where it's the first 6 days of the time loop, and I keep stepping on rakes and breaking my nose.
What did you do?
I just tried a lot of stuff. So I was playing as, I can't remember the guy's name, Louis, I think maybe. He's a young king. He's one of the Carolingians. He is a steward, which I always heard is one of the best. You always want to play stewards. Stewards are good.
Oh, you mean that's his experience path is the green one?
Yeah. His experience path was green. He's like 30. He's pretty young, not super young, but pretty young, right? And he has a lot to do because he is northern Italy. So he has northern Italy, Provence, right? Some parts of maybe Austria, I think on the right. He kind of has that whole section above Venice. But then there are all of these smaller Italian states you can just go to war, you take all their shit, which I wanted to do. I was like, fuck yeah. I don't want to play West Francia, because if you start in 867, you play West Francia. The only thing to do is go to war with your fucking brother, who's another giant kingdom.
Right.
Or you could play Lothar, who is that brother and is in Burgundy and is between all of these other ones. You know, I was just like, fuck that. I'm gonna play Italy. I'm gonna kill all these like little tiny bitch states at the bottom of the boot. I'm gonna take back Sicily from the Umayyads, all this other sort of stuff. But you have one duke. You have one duke whose son has a weak claim on your throne, and that guy fucking sucks because he builds a faction and rebels against you every time. And the first time it happened, I was like, you know what, that's on me. Fair enough. I didn't quell this fast enough. And so then I just started doing everything I could to stop this from happening. I tried murdering the son. My scheme got, I had a 6% chance. I was like, maybe I could keep re-rolling. I re-rolled the scheme a couple of times. I kept getting found out. I was just like, this is a fucking nightmare. I was like, maybe I will revoke his title. I was like, if I up my kingdom. So I went to war. I do a couple of wars at the bottom of the, I get a bunch of prestige. I up my kingdom from 1 to 2 so I can revoke titles. I revoke the Duke's title. Well, he just fucking rebels because I revoked his title. And I was just like, what do I do? How do I win? And I couldn't figure it out. And I decided I was bad. I was a really bad Crusaders Kings player. I was like, no wonder this guy's fucking campaign. Also, I'm Frankish, but my whole everybody is Lombard. They're all Lombard, you know.
How does it happen in history?
I'm pretty sure in history he doesn't have an heir. He has a bunch of girls, but he doesn't have a boy, so he has no heir, and he just kind of dematerialized basically. I was so mad about that. I thought I was so clever. I thought I could just do it. I was like, oh, I'm gonna walk in, play this king, fucking go. Did not happen.
I would say if it was easy, it would be a meme, and it's not a meme. It's like, you know, the Carlings are a meme, right? Like, but doing in that particular way,
the Carlings are a meme?
Yeah.
Who are the Carlings?
I think it's another term for the Carolingians. Maybe I'm wrong, and I've been using it wrong the entire time.
Oh, okay.
Carlings. Yeah, they're. It's another. Caroling is another word for the Carolingian dynasty. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, because and then I ended up reading a bunch of this stuff, and people do recommend that you do stuff. I'm beginning to learn a little bit about CK3, where it's like you always want to do you want to do something fucked up. So it's like, I'm gonna restart the Western Roman Empire, and so they tell you to play this guy, but you play this guy and you do stuff I don't understand. Yeah. Better players than me could have solved this factional
Sure,
I guess.
But
yeah,
you know, you set yourself a mini goal and you work towards it, right? Like a good first playthrough is like become the king of Ireland, right? Like, you know,
I do what I did next. That's exactly what I did next. I went onto YouTube and I put into YouTube. This is a true thing. I put in how to not suck at CK3. I was like, there's got to be a video. Made a video about this, and somebody made a 3-hour video that was like how to play CK3 explained in terms even my grandma would understand. And I was like, great, this is the video for me. And I started this video, and the guy play as in the bottom of Ireland, who's a really young king. You know, he's a
You
young
can play
king.
as basically any of them, and it's fine. But yeah.
Yeah, and then I united Ireland. I made the Kingdom of Ireland. I have a couple of left. Jarl, like a bone taker in the in England, is really powerful. I haven't gone to war with him yet, but I have mostly just kind of been like fucking around. I made the Kingdom of Ireland. I made a bunch of cool titles or whatever. The big thing on this playthrough that I have learned is I've become friends with my vassal. Okay, because you're starting from a single county and working your way out, you can choose who all of your vassals are. And so my thing has been I only I made friends with this guy who was like the another county. It was the county next to mine as we started. He was just like, he's like compassionate and just or whatever. I was like, fuck yeah, I love this guy. I'm not going to war with this guy, even though I would have totally thrashed him or whatever. And we became friends. And then he willingly vassalized. He was like, hey, let me be your fucking vassal. I was like, sure thing, brother. Let's go. And then I just started giving him all of my, all of my, throw titles his way because he can't join a faction because he's my friend. And I was like, this is perfect. I love this. And so, I don't know. That's what I.
So I like that kind of thing because it teaches you a bunch of stuff, right? Like, first of all, there's like the building up aspect. Also, your succession is a fucking nightmare. So like you want to get that kingdom title because when your heir inherits, he'll inherit that kingdom title, and everything else will get spread out. But at least you'll have one central point. If you don't get to the kingdom level, you have like 2 duchies, right? Like those will split, and you'll have to like go kill your brother or whatever. That's the danger with like your best friend as like one of your big vassals is when you die and your son takes over, he might not be best friends with your old best friend.
That's
right?
true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm pretty lucky with my kids so far. I have 1 son and like 4 daughters. I didn't realize how important women were. This is gonna sound so fucked up. I did not realize how important women were in CK3. One of the things that I did was I didn't have any champions or whatever, and I saw the recruit champions button. But that video was like, don't use that button. That's ridiculous. Sort your courtiers by unmarried women and marry them off to guys with really crazy prowess. And so I was like, okay. And I immediately picked up it was insane. It was like a level 32 prowess guy, a level 29 prowess guy, and a level 24, 26 or something prowess guy. And they became my champions. They became my 3rd champion. And I was like, this is insane. This is so insanely good. And then I just started doing really fucked up shit where I married the super old guys in my court who I was like, I bet you're going to fucking die soon. I married them to really young women because I was like, okay, well, they will die. And then I'll have these young girls who are in my court again, and I can just marry them to fucking Giga Chad, like McNormand face, who is just going to be a crazy strong Viking raider, right? It is, yeah. Glad we women can carry value by being worn out for clout. Absolutely, that is exactly what. In order to have a successful, realm, and
Lou, they're also valuable for establishing alliances. And
well, alliances are fucking I hated my alliance. I actually did that. I married off my 3 sisters to get 3 what I thought were powerful alliances. This is great. Nobody's ever gonna fucking attack me. I have these crazy fucking allies who are super powerful. But my super powerful fucking allies are useless because it just takes 8,000 years for them to ever bring troops to any of these wars.
It takes a while, and they're also kind of stupid.
Yeah.
But they can't. They can be useful. That's one other fun thing about playing in Ireland is that like they have like an expanded Casus Belli. Like they can just kind of like conquer their neighbors because they want to, instead of like having to have like a claim like you have to do with like the more advanced kind of factions. The trade-off for that again is that they have garbage succession, right? It's all like like split it up. It's like elective succession.
Yeah,
or something.
there's no primogeniture in my culture, unfortunately.
But you also get multiple wives. Like insular Christianity gets the multiple wives.
But why would I ever want that? I got the 1 rife and I popped. This is awful. I was thinking I was like, should I get
if you don't have enough, then you take a prestige penalty, and prestige is the coin of the realm for like that level of.
True. I mean, honestly, I was also looking for a lot of piety because all these wars were holy wars. I was spending a lot of piety on these wars because I'm insular and the rest of them are Catholic. In England, they're all Catholic, so I'm just like beating the shit. Buddy, not wanting a harem confuses me. Listen. I would have if the game encouraged me to do so, but I was trying. I got my one son, and I was just like, I'm going to hope to God that I have just this one kid, and I think maybe I will just end up having this one kid. But if I end up having another kid,
you need a spare. Do not like it, because that is like a great way for like I don't have direct evidence, but I'm convinced the game will, like, if you've got like one kid and you've got it locked down, the game's gonna be like, looks like he had an accident and died, right? Like, he like fell.
I know, this is why I have kept my kid as far from danger as possible. I've given him the book learning. He's like studying with my fucking bishop or whatever. He's not going. He's okay, he's not getting it. He's not training up his fucking soldiers like that. And I was just like, no, I will not have this. I will not have this child be put into danger. I also have a really insane marshal who is like 27.
Don't worry, you will get a pop event that says little Jimmy has caught, the plague. What do you do? Like,
yeah, true.
No, and then the fun part is when you do have like your concubines and they start giving you male heirs. It's like, oh, okay, well, whatever, right? Like, and then you find like that your concubines are trying to murder your firstborn so that their kid inherits the kingdom, right? Like, that's the way it always goes, right? Like,
yeah, true. There are a lot of murder plots that I've had to foil in my time.
I will say you do have the opportunity to like kind of like you get like some like base like relationship bonuses for siblings and half siblings. So like, if your son inherits the top level title, it's a little bit easier to grow those relationships with your vassals if your vassals are like your brothers, right? Like,
yeah.
And then the thing I also like is that it's scaling difficulty, right? You become the king of England, and then there's England, which is usually held by 1, 2, or 3 of like the Nordics, like the Danes, and like that's like a real challenge. Like that's like not like an easy street, and they generally leave you alone across the strait for a while. So
I have just stepped foot. Yeah, that's true. I just took a couple of counties on the coast of Wales, and I did this thing where I saw the Jarl, like a bone stealer or something. There's this crazy Norman raider who I guess is historic, because he has this fucking title, Jarl, whoever. He is insane. He is so crazy good and so powerful, and he owns Dublin is the problem, which I have come to understand because I read a couple of Reddit threads. I have come to understand it's pretty normal. Dublin is a very valuable county, and the Normans start with it, and so it's pretty common for them to conquer it off of one another. And kind of the most powerful Norman king in England is the one who ends up with Dublin a lot of the time. And the final boss of Ireland is to go to war with that guy and steal Dublin for yourself, basically. And I did that because he was at war with, it's not called Scotland, it's called Alba, the Kingdom of Alba, which is in Scotland.
Yeah.
So they went to war with Jarl.
That's how you do it.
And I was like, fuck yeah, let's go. This is my opening. I saved. I went to war. They are sieging down his capital. I was like, they have owned him. I am golden. I'm sieging down Dublin. And then from fucking like out of left field comes this huge stack of like 5,000 guys. And I was like, no, you're kidding me. And yeah, it just turned out that his army was somewhere else when the fucking Picts, I thought the Picts like stack wiped him because they were sieging down the capital. I was like, how on earth are you sieging down his capital? He's not going for the capital. But they have some kind of player bias. I don't know. Instead of running to save his capital from being sieged down by the Picts, he came to Dublin and he whooped my ass left, right, and center, and then left 2 guys like sieging my capital after he beat my, after he beat my ass, after he killed my 32 champion and stuff like that. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. And I save scummed.
No, that's, timing with that's always like a thing, because like sometimes they decide to go after you. Sometimes it's like you catch it at the wrong time, and like they will sue for the picks with just enough time for them to like walk over and like slap you in the face, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, so timing all of that, keeping your eye on where they are, and also sometimes you have to fight the other people they're at war with to like no, I need to seize the capital so I can get the war score, so I can get out of my war before the picks.
I did have to do that. I did that in England because I ended up declaring war for a county. A lot of these Irish counties ended up allying themselves with English kings, like petty kings or something, which I guess are dukes, but
Yeah,
they call them these petty kings. And so I would go to war for this Irish county, and the petty kings would raise their armies, and so I would have to go kind of fight the petty kings and siege down this county that I won in Ireland at the same time. And that was how that was like a big, I don't know, it's just like a big pain in my ass kind of thing of just like having to split your army and be attacking on two fronts at the same time. Hey, whatever.
Yeah, no, that is how it goes. Man, did you get any of the DLC?
Yeah, I ended up getting Royal Court, which I have liked quite a lot. I've used it a lot. I got Grand Tours. My expectation is I will like Grand Tours a lot later.
Grand Tours is good when you like start going on like pilgrimages or like other thing, or like holding tournaments or whatever, because it actually, instead of making them like 4 different pop-ups, there's actually like some mechanics to it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, this would be so much more fun if I was. That was my thing. I was like, all my gold is going into wars. I'm constantly fighting. I can't have a fucking like. What do you think I'm gonna do? Sit down and eat a feast? Like, no. I gotta kick this guy's ass and make a new duchy title in Ireland. Okay. But I was like, because my goal is to get up to emperor, right? Get the emperor title for all of Britannia, right? You conquer enough of England and conquer enough of Wales and Scotland, become emperor of Britain. That's my goal. Is I want to become the emperor. I want to turn Brittany all into mine, or else. And I was like, that's when I can leave it all to my crazy stupid son, and sit pretty, and he can just run tournament. Also, like build stuff out, I guess, if whatever.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. On my end, I have been I saw Nosferatu, which I thought was very good. Are you a Robert Eggers fan?
Yes, I want to see Nosferatu so bad.
It's pretty good.
I am like I don't want to say an OG Robert Eggers fan. What was the one movie that he did? The Witch.
The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman are the big ones.
Yeah.
I was not as big fan of The Witch. I think we've talked about this because the characters basically have no agency at all.
Yeah, it's a vibes movie.
Yeah. And I thought when I saw it the first time, I thought The Lighthouse was kind of pretentious, but it has stuck with me, so I want to rewatch it, see if I feel the same way about it. And I haven't seen The Northman, but I thought Nosferatu was good. Willem Dafoe is great. It's not a perfect movie, but like it is very cool. And what else have I done? I don't want to spoil too much, so I'm not going to say anything more about it. I beat 9 Souls. Took me a while.
Oh, nice.
First game in a long time where it was like, multiple days on the same boss trying to beat it, right? Like people say like it's like it is Sekiro to Hollow Knight's Dark Souls, right? Like, and I was like, it's like, it's kind of accurate, right? Like that makes sense. But it's fun. It's very, very good. Very, very satisfying beat. Beating that last boss was just like, perfect. It, feeling of accomplishment. Totally, there. Lots of repetitions. Good exploration stuff. This brought up an interesting thing to my head. Like, I don't want to give away too much about the story, but like one of these things where like the story's cool. I don't agree with like kind of its conclusions. But like I don't agree with like the philosophical stance that the story takes. But this is still a cool story, right? Like, fun to watch cats, right? Like they're all cats running around and hitting things with.
Is it on like a
bullets.
political level? Like
Not quite political. So it is about the nature of progress. It's like a it's like a Meam Play Gods type story, right? Like
okay.
it is a science fiction story where the main character is wrestling with the nature of progress versus or nature versus progress
Oh yeah,
effectively. Yeah.
sure, yeah, like pastoralism and shit like that.
Yeah, it's not quite
I hate this so
pastoralism,
much.
but like um it's the Tao, which is very clearly like a it's basically Taoism as far as I understand. I'm not no expert, but bunch of stuff in there. But it was it's a good game, right? Like can't say anything bad about the gameplay. So I highly recommend it to everybody out there. Go, especially if you like Metroidvanias. Go
Okay.
play some Nine Souls.
Listen, go play that. Don't play. What's the other one? Did I ever tell you this story?
Yeah,
Bo, pet the.
you told me it off cast last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, good for Nine Souls, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it won a lot of awards for like the type of sites that don't like review. When they do Game of the Year, they give little games instead of big games. So a lot of them give it to Nine Souls, which I think it deserves it. So that's a thumbs up from me. Oof, it's getting darker, buddy. What did you do?
Sorry, I got a message and I need to check it real quick.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Do you feel like this is part of like this your genre, like Metroidvania? Is this?
I think so. Yeah. No,
Okay.
I really enjoy them. The thing I heard that was most hilarious to me is like Nine Souls is basically what happens when Team Cherry doesn't put out Silk Song for like 30 years and somebody else decides to, pick up the slack and do something like it. So
Yeah, true. Oh my God, Silk Song. Can you imagine? There was a time where my life was very determined by Silk Song.
yeah, I would say
I made a bet.
only negative 700 days left in 2022 or whatever, right? Like
Yeah, I know. Oh my God. There was this time where I was trolling these I was trolling these different sort of message boards that were all purporting to it's sort of like WoW leaks. You know what I mean? Like people will always leak what the next expansion will always fan casting, bullshit's never right kind of thing. Um the there were these forums that were about, oh my sister works at Team Cherry. She says it's coming out in whatever, like January
I would say
2025.
you know that that's incorrect because there are exactly 3 people who work at Team Cherry and everybody knows who they are.
Yeah, I know exactly. And I placed a bet. I placed a professional bet in my career. I said, somebody was like, we can't release then. I've heard that's when Silk Song is coming out. And I said, well, if Silk Song comes out, I'll be a fucking idiot. And you can hang me and you can be whatever. But they haven't announced release date. I haven't seen anything credible on that. I don't think Silk Song is coming out. We're releasing on this date, kind of thing. Not in those terms, but it's essentially the argument that I made at the time. And I did end up being right, but it was funny how nervous I was. Like, they could announce Silk Song, and I could be so fucked if they did this.
Yeah, I mean, but what's the one that always releases opposite? Didn't you have a thing that always like screws up your release?
Oh yeah, fucking Hades. Hades
Right.
released on Cryptmaster. Obviously, Cryptmaster did insanely well anyway. But like, it was just funny. And then also Hades 1 released out of early access the week that we published Gone Viral.
Okay.
And then Hades 2 went into early access the day that we released Cryptmaster, or the week that we released Cryptmaster. Which was already an insanely stacked week with Cryptmaster, 1000X Resist, Animal Well, just a bunch of different. I was like, I hate this. This sucks so bad, right? But obviously, Cryptmaster did great. I'm really proud of it and everything else. Listen, it was on Yahtzee's best of
it was on Yahtzee's
year list.
It was on Adam Millard's. I think it was Adam Millard's. It was somebody's like 25 games you haven't heard of or whatever, right? Like it was like one of the first ones there. Good work.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry We're Closed was on a bunch of them. Did you ever play Sorry?
I did not.
Sorry We're Closed has one of the most insane feats I've ever accomplished in my career. That it is like 99. Hold on. It is I'm gonna go super dark once Steam pops up. Yep, I knew it. So it's overwhelmingly positive with 99% at um very at positive, which is insane, right? Like just a rate of that much, like 99% is just a truly staggeringly high number for people who have positive reviews for that game. But hey, listen, I'm glad about it.
Yeah, no, congratulations. Say like recommended by my friend Lacania.
one of the first 10 reviews, I'm sure, right?
Well, it's the one that pops up on top
me.
for me because it's reviews by friends, right? Yeah. No, what's it called? None of the guys like no curator reviews from at least people I follow. Interesting. But yeah, congraturitos. I recommended it to one of Caroline's cousins, who is into horror games and is like 21 right now, and it's like I think she would very much enjoy it. So,
that's a pretty good. I guess I would call that a pretty good profile.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Honestly, I should get her Steam name from Caroline and just buy it for her. She would enjoy it if she's not like doing exams or something.
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah. Did you ever end up playing any of the like the really big titles from this year, like Metaphor or
I hate those games though. I would never go for.
You hate JRPGs?
Metaphor is yeah, like Persona or whatever. I don't know. I've never been into any of those games. They don't look, I don't know. Maybe I could play them and get into them. It's just that's never been my. I don't know. That's never really.
Did you play Astrobot?
Yeah, well, Astrobot's PlayStation. I don't have a PlayStation.
Yeah.
But hey, I might get one when we're sort of changing the layout. I have an office now, right? Because our apartment is bigger here, and so one of the things we're doing is we're having
Charlotte is trapped down here. Oh no, she's going on my back.
Oh, yeah. We're having our two desks in here, and then between them is a TV, and the couch is behind us. Actually, can you see the couch?
I
can't see shit. I don't even know what it is. Yeah, like that's maybe a box. Actually, probably. Maybe the couch is sort of back. No wait, I can tell where I'm pointing. That is the couch. Okay. Anyway, whatever. I was like, I'm gonna have a couch and a TV. I could actually have like an Xbox. It's the one I was thinking of playing is Indiana Jones. Everybody says,
"Oh yeah, it's on Game Pass."
And it's on Game Pass. And I was like, "Fuck yeah, this is perfect. I'm gonna absolutely do that."
Yeah, I played it for I played like the opening. And I haven't gotten into it more. My brother was recommending it, so I might jump back into it. My big game for like the next big release I'm excited for is Monster Hunter World. Probably. Have you ever played Monster Hunter? I feel like you might be able to get into it.
I played a little bit of one of the Monster Hunters.
It's not World. What is it?
It was like this was maybe.
No, you might have played World, but the one that's coming out is Wilds. That's right.
Oh, was it? It was like 8 years ago, maybe I would say. I played on like a free weekend or something like that.
I feel like
you could just download it.
I feel like World
was a beta.
Yeah, Monster Hunter World is the one that I think that everybody like got into because it was like approachable and like normal, right? As opposed to being like this weird game that like only like super nerds could get into. But it's kind of like the go out, fight a monster, build some stuff, and then like the Wilds kind of plays like more like an open world game. Like the old ones, you had to like go out on a mission to do anything, and this one you just kind of like go. You see a monster, you can fucking fight it if you want, right? Like that kind of thing, rather than having to specifically go out. Like essentially used to like pick a mission, go out. It sets up the world for that kind of thing. Whereas now it's more kind of like you go out and you kind of like hunt things around, and you don't have to worry about like time, like the same type of timing stuff. It's the beta was really fun, and so I'm looking forward to that. I'm also cautiously optimistic for Avowed. This is another one of these games that like I was like, looks interesting. Don't know if I want to pre-order, and it's gonna be on Game Pass day one because it's an Obsidian game, right? So it's like, okay, I'll do it that way, right? Like I don't have to no skin in the game.
Yeah, I told myself that I was going to play Avowed February 18th. Yeah, I told myself I was going to play Avowed on release because I saw something that I thought looked good. I can't remember what it was, but I was just like, you know what, man? Fuck yeah, I will play Obsidian Skyrim. That is awesome. Let's fucking go. So yeah.
Yeah, no, there's been some culture war nonsense around it that I'm vaguely
Oh,
worried
really?
about. I think
That's my favorite.
um like if don't quote me on this because I might be screwing up something, but there was definitely something where like, some writer on the game was being like a provocative prog. But I think Chris Avlon might have said something about like, if you applied to Obsidian during this time period and you're like a white guy, you might have a real discrimination case to roll. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we'll see. I'm not gonna put too much stock in that either way, right? Like, I'll wait for
Yeah, I mean, I
reviews.
find all
Yeah.
of this culture war nonsense like deeply contemptible, but Sean, he put out the video on Stellar Blade. Do you know about this at
Is that
all?
the skull guy?
It's the Skull guy, yeah.
Yeah. Didn't you get
I think
divorced or something?
I mean, I don't know. He used to be Sean and Jen, now he's
Okay.
so I guess he did get divorced or I kind of think he's a moron. Or not a moron. He's just like I don't know. There are a lot of people who let's say I would disagree with their I'm trying to think of a charitable way to say it. Maybe I would call it historiography.
Okay.
Is the way I would call it. He did a whole video. Remember a couple of weeks ago, a couple like months ago, maybe last year. I talked about the atomic bomb and Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And like this, he was involved in this. He made a huge video about the use of the atomic bombs in Japan, all this stuff. He actually got quite a lot of the history sort of right, and then at the kind of the very end, just ended up playing the trolley problem, and it's like fucking moron, right? Like it's bad. Like this is just like bad history. And like that kind of stuff bothers me or whatever. But he made a video going after Grum's Mark Kern, who I think is a fucking idiot. So I was just like, I'm never gonna like turn down an opportunity to laugh at this idiot. So that was pretty fun. It was about Stellar Blade, the Korean like the
Booty
Korean
shooter.
booty, yeah, the booty shooter. Yeah, it's just Korean Nier Automata.
Yeah.
It's just like a Nier Automata clone, basically. But the big controversy is that they released a demo, and then in the final game, in the final version of the game, they released this demo, and then in the final version of the game, um, they changed some of the outfits or something. It wasn't even anything like real, but like all of these chuds had essentially crafted this narrative around Stellar Blade that, oh, it's so perfect. They're giving us the sexy ladies that we've always wanted, and they're that Western AAA devs hate because they're all crunchy granola liberals and all the rest of it. And when they changed these character models just a little bit, like there was like a titty outfit that had like X's, and they just sort of filled that in with kind of shirt instead of just having like true cleavage. So it's still very sexy, you know what I mean? Still, she's wearing a bathing suit.
Well,
And
let me guess.
in this bathing suit
They decided that BlackRock like sent the orders in to like.
Yes, and so it like is the story of someone shadowboxing with nothing and like losing, which is why it's so funny. But anyway, his video on that shit was and yeah, and I also hate Mark Kern so much. I think Mark Kern is such a fucking moron.
No, how is like his game that he has been working on Bader or whatever it's called?
Yeah, M Bader. Yes, Ember, but with an A B. I don't even know. I'm pretty sure actually that I actually watched another video, like a different that was all about that sort of I don't know, just collapsing into nothingness basically. because that was just all about that collapsing into nothingness because like the whole community rallied against him, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love that shit. I will. This is about Andrew. It's just like I could watch 1,000. I could watch 100,000 hours of making fun of Mark Kern. It's so fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is what, like, he's kind of a dumbass. Like, I followed him for a little while, but he never has anything like useful to say. He's kind of like regurgitates shit. And but yeah, it's all it's all whatever. We'll see how Avowed is in 2 months, I guess. Whether it's been infected by the woke mind virus or if
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I felt like I was complaining about the woke mind virus when I was talking the other day on the about Dragon Age, right?
Oh yeah. No. Like the
that,
therapy.
Obviously, I like would never. My whole career is based on the fact that I'm not a crusader against the woke mind virus, but the therapized talk that is like a thing that I actually kind of do feel like is part of the woke mind virus, right? But anyway, I don't know, whatever. I haven't finished Dragon Age, so
yeah. No, I don't know. I think people put way too much on, like, how much you want to talk into the microphone? You want to talk into the microphone? He was nosing the microphone. She's gonna be very upset with me in a second. But I feel like people put too much on, like, how much that, like, matters at the end of the day, right? Like, there are good games and bad games that have these aspects and don't have these aspects, and people are too quick to blame the politics for why it was bad when it happens, or vice versa, right? Like, I do think there are people who will extend grace to a title that has the politics that they like that they shouldn't, but, like, that's like, just a thing through the mirror, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, this is my, I think, motivated reasoning to find lives, right? Everyone is engaging all the time in confirmation bias and listening, I feel like, and I don't know. That's like the name of the game.
You can get it from both sides with Marvel Rivals. It is a Chinese studio that isn't afraid to give us big titty squirrel girl. But on the other side, if you try and say, like, a free Taiwan in the chat, it won't let you, right? Like,
no, really? You can't? That's hilarious. That's, oh my god. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. You know what else I played? I played a little bit of Overwatch, actually. I quite liked playing Overwatch. I played Overwatch again just because friends of mine, some friends of mine were just like, "Hey, we're playing Overwatch." Basically, my Mythic Plus crew.
In the chat, like, Charles says, "Downloading now." That's my jam.
Do you remember when that happened? Because the Hearthstone guy.
Oh yeah.
That there's that whole controversy. He said Hong Kong or whatever. They they rescinded his prize money.
Yeah. No, I had installed, Battle.net for, like, 3 months until, like, the next game I wanted to play came out.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, Marvel Rivals, okay? It's just too fun as Jeff the Shark.
Yeah. No, I just don't like, I played it and I just didn't like it, so I uninstalled it. It had nothing to do with, like, either Big Twitty Squirrel Girl or Free Taiwan, right? Like, you're just kind of like, that's the way it is.
Yeah, I played Overwatch the other day and I had a lot of the new tank is Hazard. He is super Scottish. He is, like, insanely Scottish, and that makes all of his voice lines, like, super funny. But I don't know. All of these games, I feel like, just are about, are there friends of mine who are playing them and can exert enough will on me to download a new client? Like, I have no interest in Marvel Rivals, but I would if all of my friends said, "That's what we're doing tonight. We're playing Marvel Rivals." Am I gonna not hang out? Obviously, I'll download and get into it. Honestly, the thing that I really want to get into so bad is Helldivers 2 again. We've been talking about that because they added at the Game Awards They added a new enemy. They surprise launched the Illuminate, who are the Protoss enemy
Yeah, yeah.
in the Helldivers universe. And I was like, that sounds awesome. I fucking loved Helldivers the first time. It was just one of those games where we played it every day until we didn't.
Yeah.
And you know, like
I've heard Dark Tide's gotten better too.
oh yeah, me too. They had the big update. I mean, I went back to play. Wait, was that when we were playing? When they did the big weapons update
I
or
don't.
class update? I mean,
Maybe I don't
it was
remember.
when they changed to the talent trees. Did you
Oh
play?
yeah,
The
yeah.
talent trees?
I think I came around to that one. Yeah.
Those talent trees are super fun. I played so much Dark Tide around then. And then they just did weapons recently. Maybe half a year ago, they did a update on all of the weapons. There's
Very
that.
cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think I bought that on with with Xbox Game Pass. Like you get a discount if you buy it with Xbox Game Pass. I think I bought it just in time for like me to not play it since. So, uh,
Yeah. Listen, we'll get there one day. Are you in the Dark Side chat?
I am.
That chat every once in a while somebody will say we should play
Yeah.
again.
Oh man. Although I would be happy to play Deadlock with anybody. Deadlock.
Oh, you're still on Deadline. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've just played a game before I got it. I beat 9 Souls yesterday, and I was like, man, what do I want? Do I want to? I don't want to jump right back into Disco Elysium. Um, and so today I played a little bit of
Oh, how are you enjoying? Do we have to do Disco Elysium? I haven't done Disco. It's obviously an insane
yeah,
indie game that I feel like I have to play for the.
yeah. I have not gotten too deep into it yet. I might restart because I want to reroll some of my stats, or maybe I won't because I'll just go with it. Um, but yeah. Otherwise, I wanted to fill with some like I installed the Riot client and I've played 2 games of Team Fight Tactics. And it's like I'm this much closer to like actually playing a game of League of Legends again. Just because Trin Immortal has made it to gold and might make it to plat. So I'm invested now. It's like
I did watch that Turn Immortal video, which was very funny. That you sent me. You sent me like a Turn Immortal most silver game ever played or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? You got me. That's a great headline for a YouTube video. I'm on all this insane cough syrup, right? Like, let's go. Let's watch a Trin Immortal video. And I watched that. I was just like, yes, wow.
Yeah.
Like
Trin Immortal is good content, except he might actually get me to play League again, which is probably a mistake. You know what I found out?
that is a huge mistake.
If you have Game Pass, you get access to all the heroes without having to pay money. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
wow, look at that. Okay.
It's like they're trying real hard to claw me back in, get me to buy more money on skins and spend more money on skins.
How many Yasuo skins have I missed since I've been gone? There's got to be 8,000 of them. So.
It's funny. Trin Immortal has changed the rules of Beat League. Instead of doing skins now, he's doing what's it called?
Mastery?
Yeah, Mastery. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, getting everybody to Mastery 7.
It was gonna be it's eventually Mastery 10, but it's like play for a while, get Mastery up. Like don't do one drive to 10 because that will drive you crazy, right? Like.
Sure.
But he wants to spend less money on skins and focus on learning the champion instead of just trying to pound out wins on each skin. Also he drew one of the I think he drew drinks when the arcane skin that you have to gacha your way to get up. He's like, I'm not fucking paying $800 to fucking maybe draw the skin, right?
I'm surprised he paid any. They started pumping out so many more skins week over week. I was like, how on earth does he have the cash to have all the skins again?
So it's from what I've watched, it seems like there aren't actually all that many more skins. First of all, he never did he never did chromas as separate skins, right? He always did chromas as one skin. And it seems like maybe there's just enough heroes that it's spread out and that they're not actually that many more skins.
Okay.
Jordan Immortal is unfunny now, and yet I watch him. is what Charles.
He is kind of unfunny. I miss so bad Javier.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
all
it's like a cut down stream, right? Which is like,
yeah.
enough for the nostalgia vibes, but not not enough to be like super funny anymore, right? Like, which is what caused him to quit in the first place, right? Was like,
Yeah.
um,
And the crazy thing is that they can't do voice chat. I was like, how on earth is it hard to just record your friends on like Discord? But it's because they all went over to his house every time in order to like do the things.
yeah. And every once in a while, one of them will show up in like a thing, right? Like, like I think like maybe 6 months ago there was a video with Javier in it somewhere, and like, by the way, it is Javier, right? Like, he's the one to have in a chat, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like fucking Sky Williams, who's like, I'm back now, I promise, and then it'll be 8 months, and he'll like release another like 10-minute video about like nonsense, right? Like, people like.
That whole, do you remember that like night? I was glued to my television while my computer screen.
For like the 8-hour Sky drama videos, right? Like,
yeah. Well, there was the thing with the house, and then he responded. He was responding to the allegations about the house, and his response was, "It's all true." And everybody was like, "Why are you admitting this?" And then his roommate pulled the router out of the wall so that he lost his internet connection and stopped streaming himself, like sobbing and crying and confessing to crimes. And we were just like, you had to be. It was like the wildest night I feel like I've just had on, I don't know, like watching a Twitch stream. Like there have been moments that I don't know. I feel like there have been a bunch of these, but there are some of these moments where, it's like, do you know anything about GameStop thing with Roaring Kitty? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do not.
Okay, so man, I was like obsessed with this. Not in a bad way.
Wait, is this a stock thing? Is this the stock market?
This okay. The GameStop start. Okay, so I don't know if you know this. A couple of months ago, at this point, Roaring Kitty, whose name is whatever, I don't even remember, Ken Bridges or some shit. That's not his name at all. I don't think it's Ken or Bridges.
It's just like Norman McNormalson, right? That you wouldn't recognize.
Yeah, it's just like some fucking guy. But I had followed this. Dan Olson made a YouTube video on it. I love Dan Olson stuff. It's great. Roaring Kitty is like kind of the guy who popularized the GameStop is undervalued thing, and he was making an argument that GameStop is valued at $4 to $5, and it's probably going to go up to $7 or $8 over the course of the next year, right? And this was all in 2020, like at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, and 2021 is when the insane GameStop weekend happened. Well, he had built so much GameStop that when GameStop went like through the roof, he became a gazillionaire, right? Because he was sort of the guy, and he became the like. But this whole movement was so crazy. Keith, yeah, exactly. This whole movement was so crazy that, he made his millions and he just kind of left. He just kind of like stopped or whatever. And I think these guys are all morons. All this thing with GameStop is ridiculous, right? It's all fluff based on nothing. There are these people who bought GameStop for $400 and they're waiting for the next big thing. And I was just kind of like gawking at them and like, flat earthers or something like that.
I would say there is a technical thing behind that, which is like the short squeeze is like a purely, financial kind of phenomenon, right? Like it isn't based on fundamentals or anything.
Well, no. Yeah. So yeah. That part was real. The part that I was interested in are the people who showed up to the party at 5 a.m. and started looking around being like, well, when's somebody coming back with booze? It's like, brother, the party's over.
Yeah.
It's never happening.
Right.
You are the bag holder, right? These are the people who I became. And in the middle of me just, I don't know, like paying attention, going to the Super Stonk Reddit and stuff like that, and like just kind of gawking at these people, Roaring Kitty came back, and he came back with, I think it was a tweet, but maybe I think it was actually, maybe it was just a picture on the Super Stonk Reddit that showed his investment account that showed he actually hadn't sold most of his GameStop. He was still holding $300 million in GameStop, and he came back and he put like 2 rockets or something, which was ludicrous, right? Everyone assumed this guy was a day trader. You know what I mean? Like, he was a day trader. There was no way he would get high on all of this shit from Superstock. But apparently he didn't, and he came back, and for like 2 days I was like, the fucking stock market, like, it's gonna happen again, because this guy came back and he, you know, like, all the whatever, nothing ended up happening.
Right.
I think the stock like went up, and he just kept posting pictures of how his portfolio was going up, but then it crashed again and that and all that. But I was just like, I was so locked in for that like night where I was like, tomorrow when the stock market opens, it's gonna be buck wild, basically. Anyway, stuff like that is just like, I don't know, it's like weird.
Yeah, I mean, the thing there is that like it wasn't going to happen again because it wasn't just memes, right? It was actually like institutional investors seeing an opportunity to kind of like squeeze the shorts in such a way that would like force them to sell at a higher price, right? Like, you know.
Yeah, and the one capital, you know, the one did have a truly ridiculous position in GameStop, right? Like, the short squeeze that they pulled off against, I think it was like Melvin Capital or something like that.
Something like that.
Was like, yes, legitimate. I cannot believe they shorted that stock to a dangerous degree, right? But yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, meme stock's gonna meme. I was once on the wrong side of a meme stock, but that's because like Palantir got caught up in the meme thing, and I think Palantir is a solid stock, right? And it like when GameStop jumped, it jumped to like 40 and then dropped back down to 10. But like, you know, it's not like I put my life savings in or anything. But now it's at 80, so you know I'm sitting pretty well with it. So, you know, good jobs with Stunk. In the chat, Charles says the $ Palantir. Am I right? And Lou says I've never felt more like an adult than right now.
Yes, we're talking about stocks on the podcast. Yes. I was actually, you know, somebody at my work was asking me about podcast recommendations. He was like, "Oh, what do you use for your microphone? How do you set up? This is how we do this." The podcast. I was like, "What kind of podcast do you want to start?" He's like, "I want to start a podcast about business and philosophy." And I was like, "What a loser! Am I right? Business and philosophy, a podcast about business." That, you know, not actually, Xavier. You're the best, but it was just like funny that it's such an adult topic to have a podcast at, and we're talking about fucking movies, you know,
video games, yeah,
video game shows from 20 years ago.
Yeah, you know, to an audience of 2 on the day.
Yeah.
All right, do we want to call it there? We've almost gone 2 hours.
You know, calling it there might be
get an extra bonus 20 some odd minutes since we've been gone for so long, so enjoy it. All right, well, if you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, you can email us at derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. You can watch us on twitch.tv/derpsgames or youtube.com/derpsgames, but these go out live. Let me check to make sure that no one has commented on the YouTube, because of course they have. Literally no one watches this YouTube, the YouTube channel. But what else? Links are all down in the description. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
Do I have any? Oh yes, the Airframe beta. The Airframe beta is this week. So Airframe Ultra, new game of mine coming out at some point. We're doing our first beta weekend this weekend. Highly recommend it. Everybody should come and play and beat ass. I'm gonna be streaming on Friday, actually. So if you want to come kill the shit out of me because I'm very good at my own video game, come hang out. Is what I would say.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, looking forward to that. I might try and jump into that if I've got some extra time. But that's everything I've got. I'll say until
my channel is at Akupara Games.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
AKUPARA. Yeah,
good,
I'm sorry.
Good call.
In the chat.
Yeah. So With that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.